everyone. This is Jamie Marboe Nichols, and I am the host of the Heart of Dentistry Podcast, where we take the ache out and put the heart back in to our dental profession. Please join me as I interview various guests who have opinions and also solutions to what is going on in our profession and helping us put the heart back in. Hello, everyone. This is Jamie Marboe Nichols, and I am so excited for the guests that I have on today for the Heart of Dentistry, where Lorie Streeter is going to help us take the ache out and put the heart back in. Lorie, you and I have known each other over the years off and on
Yep.
through ADOM and various organizations,
Yep.
but we've never really gotten to know each other. I know there's been a respect from afar, from
Same.
me towards you. And now
Same.
we're in due together, and so we get
Yep.
to see each other every week. And
Yep.
you live in my old home state of Idaho. So I would like you to introduce yourself, and then we'll get started with the topic. So go ahead, Lorie.
Do you want the 30-year pitch or the quick version? Let's do the quick
Let's
version
do the
today,
quick
probably.
version since we only have
Yeah,
15, 20 minutes.
perfect. So I've been in dentistry for 36 years and I started when I was 2, right? So I mean that's also not true. But yeah, I started as a dental office manager with absolutely no experience and I worked my way up. I worked at a DSO, I worked at Patterson Dental, then found ADOM and spent 18 years helping grow that community and work with some amazing sponsors. And I think that's where I met you the first time, which was awesome. I now work for a company called Max Assist. It's a SaaS company and pretty amazing. I've had a great year with them, and I'm really looking forward to talking today and getting to know all the things that everybody wants to say, but nobody wants to actually say them. And I know you're the right person, the right host to drag that out of me. So if there's something odd that I might want people to know is that when I was 7, I was on the Gong Show. So that's I
In
usually use that for
'07.
two truths and a lie. I was on the Gong Show, the original Gong Show. So yes, something fun.
Oh my gosh. Okay. I love it. I love it. I love it. You're very talented. And we know that people that know you, that you're a very talented person, inside and out of dentistry. So, I want everybody to sit back. We're going to have a kind of a conversation that is going to make some of you uncomfortable. But my whole mantra for season 3 of the Heart of Dentistry is to get comfortable with being uncomfortable. We hear that saying quite a bit, but I really am digging deep, and I'm purposely handpicking my guests because I know that they can handle that. And so, what we're going to talk about today is, and we're going to do this in 2 parts because we have a lot to cover, and I really try to honor time with no more than 20 minutes. So, we're going to try and keep that going. But your years of experience really are more on the business team side,
Sure.
right?
Yes.
Okay, that's fair. And all of mine, for I would say, because I'm 40 years in dentistry since I was 2 as well,
Of course.
most of mine has been the clinical side.
Sure.
It wasn't until I went to go work for Patterson Dental as a EagleSoft consultant that I sat up front more often than not when I was doing my trainings, and I was watching the flow of how they were using EagleSoft, whatever I was doing, to help them utilize it and implement it with fewer strokes and with less headaches. I started to notice that a lot of the clinical team members are a little bit impatient, maybe when they come up to the front, sometimes tapping a pen or a pencil or their finger, um, maybe not being as attentive to the patient and telling the patient to take a seat. And when Jamie's ready, she'll get to you, whatever it might be. So I want to kind of go backwards and say this is not going to be a slam to either side of the wall. This is about assumptions from the clinical team to the business team and vice versa. And how do
Yes.
we close that gap? Because I feel like our teams are a little bit under siege right now with a lot of assumptions, a lot of mistrust in when I go and do my coaching. So how do we bridge that gap? And that's our conversation. We're going to start off with the assumptions and the feelings, the ache for the business team first. And then in part two, we're going to go the opposite side, and I'm going to go from the ache and the assumptions that the clinical team sometimes utilizes, and maybe how we can get the heart back in on both sides of the wall. So
Love that.
yeah. So let's just start, let's just rip that Band-Aid off right now. You tell me, and honestly, this is not to be disrespectful. So if sometimes have a little pun or we say something, I want you to know that I stand behind everything Lori's going to say, and Lori's going to stand behind everything I say because we've lived it. We've been in the trenches 35 years, 40 plus years. So we're not saying anything that we either haven't done or assumed or haven't witnessed. So Lorie, tell us right now, what do you think are the top maybe two or three assumptions that the business team makes about the clinical team that can get us into hot water?
Well, I think the big one has always for me been the hygienist, office manager, or front office person, that dynamic. So I used the word earlier, prima donna, all the things. I mean, there's a real thought process, unfortunately, on the front side, that hygienists think they're better than the front because they're more educated. And I think that's difficult because as a front office person for many, many years, I went to the school of hard knocks, right? I went to
Mhm.
school every day and learned how to treat patients and all the things. The hardest part about it was that was my assumption going in. It took me about half a minute to realize that my hygienist was going to end up becoming my best friend. And when I saw things from her perspective, it was a big change. So for me, I think that's a big one. In fact, the dentist that hired me right out of the chute, fresh, he's like, "You're going to love our hygienist. She's awesome. Personality's like you. You're going to be great friends." And honestly, I gravitated more toward the assistant because she was a little raw, a little real, where our hygienist was kind of floofy. And she drove a nice BMW and she was right there. If her schedule went, bad, went south. Fill that schedule, fill that schedule. So it took me a little bit of time to lose the assumption that I was less than the hygienist because she had a different degree and had a different perspective on the patient. So
So would you say then that some of that assumption comes from even your own internal insecurities of thinking they do have more education, right?
absolutely.
So that assumption comes back at us, right, as well. So, okay. And
Yeah,
and and I would say that you're not far off, that there are prima donnas that are hygienists. I call them tiara wearing teammates, but they could be a hygienist, they could be an assistant, they could be the office manager. I call them tiara wearing, you know, but I really think we have to look at where they're coming from. And that's why this conversation is going to be so great. So tell me a little bit, tell us, the listeners, what what made you bridge that gap with this person? What do you remember
sure.
some specific questions or things that happened that you went, aha, it isn't that she's a prima donna, it's what? Fill in the blank.
Well, I think it's not that she was a prima donna. I think I didn't, it took a little bit of time, to be honest. And it took me listening, actively understanding that my paycheck didn't determine, what she was doing didn't determine my paycheck, but what I was doing determined hers. That's the way the
Mm.
office was set up. So that helped a lot for me to understand and put myself in her shoes to see that she really did depend on me being, very efficient at the schedule. I think that's what helps me in my job now because I understand that dynamic. She had bills and a life and all the things. And the other thing was, my office, where I sat, I was in earshot of how she treated the patients. So I gained a huge respect because I was listening to how she interacted with every single one of them. And Jamie, it was fascinating. She knew so much about all of them. And so I kind of went from an initial judgment, which is a problem, right? We always want to be curious and not judgmental. I went from initial judgment to really listening and going, wow, she really knows our patients. They love her.
Yeah.
There's something to this. So for me, it was the listening, the active listening, and understanding that at the moment she knew the patient so well that there must be something to what, she's all that in a bag of chips. So in my mind, farther down the road, and she ended up being one of my best friends. She did wear a tiara, and I put it there a lot of the time. And I learned to gap the fact that I thought she was like that with I'm going to act like she's all that in a bag of chips because I want patients to keep their appointments, love coming back into the office, and we're more of a team than adversaries. But it took a
Oh,
little bit,
I love that. I love that you said that because it's a win-win. When you
right?
support your team members on the phone, because you're the first line of defense, right? And they
Mhm.
say, oh, so and so, whatever they might say to you, hurt me, or so and so didn't say that. You get to now take her side while still listening to the patient.
Mhm.
So you get to defend her and say, I really don't think that's what Jamie intended.
Right.
But let's talk about it. Your feelings are validated with me, so I just want to talk more about it. And I
Yeah.
think they can't help but think that the trust for her to you was built over time too, so that she knew when you got maybe received some of those crucial conversations from patients, you had her back.
Yeah, for sure. And I was one of those, office managers that would jump in and set up trays and use the autoclave and do all the things. So I was one of those that, I had fun names for all of the tools. And I would go, okay, the pickle goes here, and pickle sickle, I had all those things. So it
Yeah.
took me just a little bit, but I learned once that I had her humming and she knew I had her back too. We just worked as a really good team. So I would say the speed bump was my misconception of my own insecurities going in. And how many people want to admit that they're insecure, that they feel less educated or they feel dumb around a particular my first day at work, the assistant came up and handed me an orange book and said, "Learn this." That was my first day at work. And I'm like, it was this thick. And I'm like, I don't even know what you want me to do with this. You want me to make
Yeah.
us start a fire? I don't know. Let's go.
Yeah. That's funny.
Yeah.
What would you say? What is one of the biggest mistakes you would say, or learning lessons? Let's just change it. Lessons you learned in your being hands-on office manager that you would like all other newer office managers or even seasoned office managers to know?
Yeah, just in general or my relationship with the hygienist?
No, just in general with your job. You guys have a lot on your shoulders and you
Yeah.
guys are you're the plate spinners and praying that none of the plates drop is how I discovered that title or that visual for when I'm talking about, because I speak on this. I speak on closing the gap between the front and the back.
Yeah.
So what would you say is something to our listeners that you really learned the hard way? Like really the hard way. Let's be vulnerable here.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think for me it was learning that I didn't need everyone's approval all the time. Even in a dental office too. So if I just settled back and focused on my patients and then focused that same attention on the team, that those two things came into a happy marriage. Like I couldn't be one way with patients and then another way with the team. And because we were a single doctor practice, meeting with my doctor and staying aligned with what his visions and goals were long term, super important. And talk about learning the hard way. When he had a difficult conversation with the hygienist or with the assistant, learning to try to take yourself out of the middle of that if they insert you in a certain point, that's a big hard lesson. You want to stay neutral to a degree and also fight for the respect that you deserve as an office manager. That's the hardest thing. We talked about that a little bit when we were talking about the hygienist, that the office manager lives in this weird place We are the first face of the patient, like you said. Sometimes we're the last face, right? And then we have to be cheerleaders for the team. Plus, we have to listen. And I think, going back, if I had to change anything about how I managed, I think I would have had my team. I like the three before it gets to me kind of thought process where you're like, try three things before you bring it to me to solve.
Yeah.
And when you're in a small working environment, let's face it, you're more like a family. And I think the biggest
Yeah.
thing, and I'm sure this is a longer conversation, but the biggest thing is you are literally replicating your family dynamic. So if you grew up in a household where a couple people were the favorite, or so and so was always picked on, or someone always needed attention, that's going to play itself out in some way, shape, or form. So I don't
Hmm.
know if that exactly answers your question, but the biggest thing I learned was to be curious versus judgmental because that
Yeah.
changed everything.
What I heard you say, Lorie, was that you realized, because I hear this all the time, that patient always comes first. And I don't think that's always true. I think what you said, what I heard you say is, as the office manager, now we're not talking about just business team, we're talking about the office manager,
Hmm.
that when how you treat your patients should be equal to how you help treat your team.
Yeah, absolutely. I was on a podcast with Kevin Henry, and we were talking about the handoff to the
Mhm.
back. And I think that's where that really comes into play. I think here it is a good analogy. We have kids, right? And you want your kids to see a happy, healthy marriage. Now, it's not that way all the time, but for the most part, that's the image you want your kids to feel and see so that they can, stay in it, replicate it, do whatever needs to be done. I feel like that's the same in a dental practice. Like, I want the patients to see that I love my hygienist. I
Yeah.
want them to see that I love my doctor and I have so much respect, right down to, yeah, I had to have a wisdom teeth pulled because I didn't grow one on the other side. And guess who I let do it? And I'll never forget, he gave me I don't know, who knows what kind of pill it was to calm me down because I stayed awake when he took it out. But I remember what I said to him when I looked at him when he was numbing me up, and I said, "You are the best dentist I've ever been to." And when you say those things when you're high, I don't know, that's not probably not an appropriate word, but you know what I mean? When you say those things and you mean what you say. And
Yeah.
so that having that respect, but you want it in return. That's the hard part. And I think sometimes that's where the breakdown happens, is that the dentist doesn't give enough authority to the office manager. People don't understand their place, who rules the roost. And especially with a group of women, there's a lot of pecking order that goes on. So,
Yeah, yeah. Okay, I like that. Um, we have about 5 minutes more. Give me our listeners one more assumption that could put the nail in the coffin between the business team and the clinical team, whether it's assistants, hygienist, or even the doctor when he's the clinician and not the boss, so to speak.
I just did a video on this yesterday. Don't assume that my bad mood is about you. And I think we all are human. We're all going to come to work with something. My house is chaotic right now. If I come and I'm a little bit shorter than I normally am in how I reference you or talk to you, don't instantly assume that you did something. I think it's really hard and really mature. We have to hold ourselves and stop and say, okay, you are not usually that short with me. Are you okay? There's a difference between or turning around the corner and going, oh my God, what is wrong with Lorie? She's a grouch today. And that's what normally happens. Normally, we use it to fuel conversations that should not be happening. And
Exactly.
unfortunately, it's somewhat human nature. But if we can stop it at the gap and say, okay, as a servant leader, I'm noticing that my hygienist is like barely speaking in her prophies. That's not normal. What's wrong? Something,
Yeah.
that's the deal about, I think you're also an empath, if I remember correctly, or at least it's in your
It's
top
in
10.
it's not quite my top five, but it's in my top. I think it's number 10.
Yeah, I mean, empathy is a big deal for me, and part of what happens is when I'm a child of empathic parents too. I grew up and walk in the room and I survey what's going on. How does everybody feel? What's happening? And then I have this mentality, and it works a lot as an office manager. I'm a fixer to a degree. So I would say the last hurdle is like, don't take things immediately personal, because that just fuels negative behavior all the way around. So
Hmm.
I think for me, a cardinal rule in any dental practice is stop, look, and listen. Stop when you hear something that bothers you. Look to see if there's anything that's physically, mentally, emotionally that you can see. We used to call them behavioral modification. We call them beamers. Like you can
Hmm.
see the person's face doesn't look the same. Their eyes aren't lit up like they usually are. Stop, look. And then when you're listening, listen to how they're responding to you. Is it different than what they normally do? And then kind of get curious.
Yeah,
Did
I
I do
like.
something? That kind of thing.
Yeah, I just did the episode before, well, episode 6 of season 3. I talked about my own depression, and I talked about because it could be just a bad day, but it could also be something deeper than that. And
Sure.
the military has something called STAR, and it's similar to your stop, look, and listen. And it is stop, it is think, and then it is act, and then it can either be review or it can be reply.
Mhm.
So I think it's similar, but I think it's important that we are paying attention. If that bad day turns into a bad week, into a bad month, into a bad quarter, you don't really need to look and see if maybe something's going on behind the scenes, and if they're really maybe more than just in a funk, as I said in episode 6. The other thing you brought up is the strengths. I do this with every single one of my teams, and I put their individual strengths through Gallup. It's all Gallup strength finders, and we do this through Do, and other organizations do it. But I've noticed that the empaths that have it in their top 5, while it is such a wonderful thing to a certain extent to have that empath in your life, it comes with a high price sometimes to the person with the empathy, because they can't understand why other people don't see it when they need it. They don't see why they aren't getting the empathy. And that makes them feel like a victim sometimes. So what I say is, because not everybody's going to feel good about coming up to Lorie and saying, "Hey, you're not acting like you normally do," right? What I suggest is that they can say at the morning huddle, "Hey, I need a little grace today. I had a rough night, or I've got a lot going on. So do not take it personal. I am just going through a rough day. I just need to let you guys know." But I also say that asking for grace comes with an expiration date. So you can't keep asking for grace on that bad mood and the way you're treating people day in and day after. So I think we've uncovered a lot of great things on this, and we're going to uncover more on our part 2 of taking closing the gap between the business and the clinical team. So,
Awesome.
Lorie, how can people get a hold of you? We'll have it in the notes when we do this, but is there an email or something that they can get a
Yeah.
hold of you at?
Yeah, it's Lorie.Streeter at maxassist.com. And I also have Lorie Streeter maxed out on Instagram, TikTok, and LinkedIn. And I'm always open to having great conversations like this. And I really love that proactive approach. Tell everybody up front, having a rough day, but
Give me some
just,
grace.
yeah, give me some grace, but it only lasts for a day.
Yeah,
You don't get
yeah.
it tomorrow.
You
So
don't get
let's
it every
talk
day for
more.
the next year.
That's right.
Okay. Thank you so much, Lorie, and I look forward to our part 2. Okay. Thanks
Sounds
everyone for
good.
joining us, and we will see you next time on the Heart of Dentistry, taking the ache out and putting the heart back in. The Heart of Dentistry Podcast, where we take the ache out and put the heart back in to our dental profession.